Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really questioning something fundamental, something we usually take as totally universal.
We are. We're looking at knowledge itself, specifically ideas around mathematics, philosophy,
Yeah,
things we assume are just there outside of culture or politics.
exactly. And our sources today, well, they dive deep into African intellectual traditions, arguing that these concepts, even something as basic as number, aren't singular at all.
No, they're social products.
Hmm.
They emerge from specific ways people live, specific practices, and, yeah, even politics within a community.
So our mission here really is a kind of conceptual decolonization. We want to give you a shortcut to understanding how different ways of thinking, different logics will focus a lot on the Euro-Bay English contrast actually shape reality for people.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? How can numbers be multiple, different across cultures, yet seem so singular, so absolute in, say, global science or commerce?
Right, it forces you to ask, what is a number? Really, this isn't just history. It's about seeing the power dynamics when one way of thinking gets translated, or maybe even forced, into the terms of another.
And understanding these different logics impacts everything: science, social life, justice, everything. We're trying to move past that default assumption that the Western way is the only way or the neutral way.
Okay, let's get into it. So let's start with the most concrete example, numbers, quantification. The core idea from the sources is pretty radical. Numbers aren't these pure culture-free things.
Not at all. They're social products. And looking at Yoruba versus English counting really shows how the how of counting shapes the what.
Okay, English logic first. It's based on what the sources call the one-many relation. It seems straightforward to us.
Right. It's basically additive. You take single units, you add them up. 1, 2, 3. Our base 10 system is built on adding single units and powers of 10.
And the things we're counting are, well, the sources call them spatiotemporal particulars, like individual objects or units existing in space and time. Fingers, apples, meters.
Yeah, equivalent units. Each one is like the one before it. And because of that, number names in English mostly act like adjectives, right? 3 dogs. The 3 tells you the extent of the dogness, how many individual dogs.
It's linear, sequential. Each unit follows the next. And this linearity, the sources argue, is why the idea of zero caught on relatively easily in systems like ours.
Exactly. 0 as a placeholder for, well, for nothing, but a nothing that holds the place in the sequence. It fits that additive linear structure. It works well for trade, for abstract math. It's dominant globally.
Okay, but now, the Yoruba system. This operates on a totally different logic. The whole part relation.
This is where it gets really mind-bending. Instead of focusing on individual units, the Yoruba logic seems to prioritize what the sources term sortal particulars.
Sortal particulars, meaning?
It's more about the kind of substance or matter first. Think food matter, rain matter, goat matter. You identify the category, the sort of thing it is, before you quantify how it appears.
So instead of counting 3 raindrops as 3 separate things?
The focus might be more on the rain matter itself, the ojo matter, and how it's manifesting. Is it a drizzle, a downpour? The sources call these modes the manner of appearing. It shifts the focus from just accumulation to the inherent qualities of the substance.
That's a big shift. But the calculation mechanism is even wilder. It's multi-base, 20, 10, 5, but it barely uses addition.
Right. This is the stunner. The main ways numbers are generated are through multiplication and subtraction. Mostly subtraction, actually.
Subtraction, how does that work for basic numbers?
Okay, take 19. In Yoruba, it's mat din logan. Literally, 20 it reduces 1.
Wow, so you go to the next base 20 and subtract back down.
Exactly. You're always relating it to the next whole, the next base unit. Or 75. That's calculated as 20 by 4, 5. 4 20s take away 5.
That sounds mentally complex compared to just adding 70 plus 5. Why do it that way? Is there an advantage?
Well, the sources argue the complexity is the advantage. Because it uses multiple bases and this subtractive process, it creates, and I quote, a plethora of factors. Lots of ways to multiply and divide easily within the system itself.
So the claim is it was a better calculator.
Potentially, yes, a superior calculating machine in some ways. The argument is that this internal complexity meant there was less need to invent external tools like graphic numerals or even zero. The system managed complex calculations internally.
So English focuses on those spatiotemporal particulars things in space and time. Yoruba focuses on sortal particulars, the kind of matter.
And that difference echoes through the language. Yoruba statements about matter are often tenseless. When something happened might be less important than the inherent nature of the substance being discussed. That's a fundamentally different way of framing reality.
which must make translation incredibly difficult, and brings us to this idea of symmetrical anthropology.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. You have bilingual speakers fluent in both logics. But in, say, an academic setting, the English logic is often treated as the default, the normal one.
Which automatically makes the Yoruba logic seem secondary or less logical.
Exactly. It imposes a power dynamic. How do you force someone to choose which bit of mind, which perfectly functional logic, they should use? It's about recognizing these aren't just different words for the same thing. They are different, valid ways of structuring reality.
Okay, so this deep challenge to the idea of a single universal logic connects directly to the push for conceptual decolonization in African philosophy.
Absolutely. It's not just about numbers, it's about all concepts. Thinkers like Wiredu, Geke, they argue that African philosophy has to grapple with how colonialism subordinated indigenous ways of knowing.
And the starting point is taking African languages and cultural experiences seriously.
Critically important. If language structures how you even conceive of numbers, imagine its impact on ethics, metaphysics, epistemology, everything. You can't just translate Western philosophical terms and expect them to fit perfectly.
So to understand the landscape here, H. Odera Uruka's framework mapping out the main trends seems essential. Let's walk through those. First, ethnophilosophy.
Right. This was an early, influential trend. Thinkers like Temples and Biddy, Senghor, they argued that traditional Africa had this philosophical unanimity.
Meaning everyone kind of shared the same basic worldview.
Pretty much. That philosophy was embedded in the community in myths, proverbs, rituals, a kind of collective ready-made wisdom. They called it culture philosophy sometimes. They were trying to document this shared Bantu philosophy or similar concepts for different groups.
But this came under heavy fire, didn't it, from African philosophers themselves?
Oh, big time. Hounsinji or Ruka, too. They argued ethnophilosophy made a crucial mistake. It didn't distinguish between popular beliefs, folk wisdom, what you might call first-order thinking, and actual critical reflective philosophy, the second-order analysis.
So just describing what people believe isn't the same as doing philosophy on those beliefs.
Exactly. Hounsinji famously called it third-world folklorism. He insisted philosophy had to be rigorous, critical, usually written, and engage in theoretical debate, not just collecting proverbs.
Which leads directly to the second trend, professional philosophy.
Yeah, this was partly a reaction against Islam philosophy. These philosophers said, look, African philosophy needs to meet the same standards of rigor and critical analysis as philosophy anywhere else in the world. It has to be academic, critical, individual.
Okay, so a push for academic standards. But then there's the third trend, nationalist ideological philosophy, which sounds much more applied.
Definitely. This was driven by post-independence political leaders. Nkrumah in Ghana, Nyerere in Tanzania, Senghor again in Senegal. They weren't just doing abstract philosophy, they were trying to build nations.
So they needed a philosophical basis for their new states.
Right. They often looked to traditional African values, humanism, communalism, what Nyerere called ujamaa or familyhood, as the foundation for a unique political theory, often with socialist leanings.
But they couldn't just copy the past, could they? They were dealing with modernization.
That was the huge tension. How much tradition do you keep? How much is actually obsolete, as they sometimes put it, in a world of cities, money, global politics? It was a really difficult balancing act.
So we have folk wisdom, academic rigor, political ideology. Aruka tried to find a middle path with his fourth trend, sage philosophy.
This was Aruka's big contribution, trying to bridge the gap, especially between ethnophilosophy and professional philosophy. He made a key distinction within oral traditions.
Okay, what was the distinction?
He separated the folk sage from the philosophic sage. The folk sage is the expert in the community's shared wisdom, the proverbs, the traditions. They know what everyone knows, but really well.
Okay, and the philosophic sage?
That's the crucial difference. The philosophic sage is also embedded in the tradition, but they are capable of critical, independent reflection. They question, they analyze, they might even disagree with the commonly held beliefs. They offer rational objections.
So this demonstrated critical thinking within the oral tradition itself, undermining the idea that philosophy had to be written and academic.
Precisely. Aruka argued these sages showed that critical reason wasn't just a Western import. It was happening in Africa, among people who might be illiterate, but were engaged in deep philosophical thinking.
Now, I remember reading that Aruka's initial work documenting these sages,
Well,
it mainly featured men.
yes, that was a significant gap. His 1990 book had very few women. But later researchers, especially Gail Presby, made a conscious effort to find and interview female sages.
And they found them, women engaging in that critical reflection.
Absolutely. People like Muthoni, Nteshia Nalama, Julia Uko, Maria Awoko, their perspectives were vital, often offering critiques of traditions that specifically impacted women, like providing reasoned arguments against female circumcision based on harm and lack of necessity. It showed critical thought wasn't limited by gender.
But even sage philosophy as a method wasn't without its critics, right? Methodological concerns.
True. Some questioned if the line between folk and philosophic sage was always clear in practice. Others felt it didn't pay enough attention to the way philosophy was expressed locally, the specific genres of speech or performance.
And there was the issue of the researcher's role, the provocateur idea.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah.
Critics asked, if the academic researcher has to prompt the sage to talk about abstract philosophical topics, are the resulting ideas truly indigenous, or are they shaped by the researcher's agenda?
How did Urga respond to that?
He defended it, pointing to figures like Socrates in the Western tradition, arguing that great thinkers often need provocation and questioning to articulate their ideas fully. The point wasn't that the ideas were foreign to the sage, but that the interview process helped bring them out systematically. It really highlighted the need to understand the context, the language, the logic, to get beyond just translation.
Okay, so the focus on the individual sage, even the philosophic one, leads us to another layer of critique. Some sources argue that this whole focus on individual genius is, well, itself a problem, an insufficient methodology.
Yeah, and even a false epistemology of thought. That sounds academic, but the core idea is simple. Is thinking really just something that happens inside one brilliant person's head?
Or is it fundamentally social?
Exactly. If we demand that philosophy comes only from lone, critical individuals, we risk missing or dismissing entire systems of knowledge that are built and held collectively by a community. We might label that wisdom almost philosophy, but not quite.
And the prime example given is the collective sage model, drawn from the Maasai.
Right. Here, the argument is that Maasai philosophy isn't located in one specific elder dispensing wisdom. It's accumulated over generations, embedded in their shared practices, rituals, symbolic systems.
Like their beadwork. How does beadwork function philosophically?
It's a visual language, really. The patterns, the colors, the arrangements, they aren't just decorative. They encode history, social relationships, cosmology, status. It's a collective material archive of their worldview.
Which you'd completely miss if you only interviewed individuals asking abstract questions.
Totally. The philosophy is in that collective expression, built up over time.
This critique of individualism also extends to political and social movements, challenging Western ideas like Max Weber's theory of charisma.
Yes, Weber focused heavily on the individual prophet or leader figure. But that model doesn't fully capture the energy of movements like, say, Rastafari. That's where the concept of democharisma comes in.
Democharisma, meaning charisma of the people.
Kind of. The idea is that the community doesn't just form around a charismatic person, but around a charismatic idea for Rastas. The idea of Rastafari Haile Selassie as divine. The authority, the charisma, is dispersed throughout the community. It's not concentrated in one leader.
So creativity and insight bubble up from the group.
Precisely. And this is reflected powerfully in Rasta language itself. They have this deep commitment to individual autonomy, this anti-vanguardism. You see it in the replacement of we with I and I.
I and I. What's the significance of that phrasing?
It's profound. It asserts both individual identity, I, and connection to the divine or the collective, and I, simultaneously. Each person is fully autonomous, connected, but not subsumed. It rejects the idea of needing a leader or party to speak for them. It's a direct linguistic challenge to hierarchies that elevate one individual over the collective wisdom.
This idea of philosophy emerging from collective practice and struggle takes us to a very contemporary example. The Symphony Way pavement dwellers in South Africa.
A really powerful case study. Hundreds of families evicted, living together on the side of a road. Their philosophy wasn't written in books. It was forged in their daily struggle, their meetings, their arguments, their solidarity.
How did they develop it?
Through constant discussion, debate, consensus building under incredibly difficult conditions, they lived their philosophy of shared responsibility and resistance. It embodies this core idea of relational philosophy. You can't have a theory of decolonization without a decolonizing practice. Philosophy becomes a social relation, built from the ground up.
So moving beyond just discussion and debate, the sources emphasize the huge role of performance, ritual, art, music, dance in generating and expressing deep philosophical ideas.
Absolutely central. Things like Ngoma, the drums of affliction rituals found in many parts of Africa. These aren't just about letting off steam.
They're diagnostic,
Hmm.
analytical.
Very much so. The drumming, singing, dancing are part of a process that includes divination, a kind of intellectual analysis to figure out what's wrong. What community values have been broken? What social tensions are causing the illness or misfortune? The performance is the framework for both diagnosis and cure, for restoring balance.
The description of Hemba funerals embleiled in the Congo really highlights this, particularly the gendered roles in the performance.
Yes, these are incredibly complex events, essential for the spirit's journey and for healing the living community. And the male and female roles are distinct, but equally crucial.
Let's break that down. First, the men's oratory, Mwanda.
This is formal, structured speech-making. It's vital for resolving conflicts that might arise around the death, negotiating inheritance or death payments, settling succession. And it's not just about logic. Eloquence is key.
Eloquence involving proverbs, veiled speech.
Essential. Speech without proverbs is considered naked, unsuitable. And the indirectness, the artful, veiled language is crucial. Why? Because often there are underlying suspicions maybe about witchcraft, maybe about who bears some responsibility for the death.
So direct accusations will just blow things up.
Exactly. It would polarize everyone instantly. The poetic proverbial language allows difficult truths and negotiations to happen without causing an irreparable rift. It's sophisticated conflict resolution through performance.
And complementing this is the women's song dance, Mususa.
And it's not just complimentary, it's required. The sources say the funeral rites, including the payment negotiations, cannot be completed without Mususa. It shifts the mood, brings in heat and vitality through performance.
That's its function.
It's about engaging the ancestors, comforting the grieving family through animated consoling, and ultimately helping to achieve that final resolution. The quality of the performance directly impacts its effectiveness. It's not just entertainment, it's necessary ritual work.
This idea of distinct gendered power, especially spiritual power, also comes up with the Sanda society among the Gola people.
Yes, the Sande is the powerful women's secret society. It's seen as ancient and sacred, and importantly, it's responsible for the discipline of women.
Why? Because women are seen as having particular spiritual powers.
Exactly. Powers that could potentially be used for witchcraft. Sande manages and channels that power. But there's a political twist.
The paradox.
Right, even though Sande holds immense sacred authority, the overall political structure places it as subordinate to the male authority, the Bond Society. Female Sande leaders ultimately have to defer to male leaders and share resources. So female spiritual power is recognized, even feared, but contained within a male-dominated political hierarchy.
Let's shift back to core Yoruba concepts that have endured, even traveling across the Atlantic to the diaspora, Ori and Iwa.
Foundational concepts. Ori is often translated as the spiritual head or destiny. It represents your innate potential, what's possible for you in life.
But it's not predetermined.
No, that's the key. Your Ori gives you potential, but you have to activate it through your choices, your actions, your free will. And central to that is Iwa, which means character. Good character.
So character unlocks destiny.
Essentially, yes. There's a core saying in the Ifa tradition. Good character, Iwa, is the essence of religion. It's explicitly valued above wealth, status, family connections. Good character makes the person. And patience, Suri, is seen as the father of good character.
And then there's Isu, often tricky to understand.
Very. Isu, or Exuelegba in Brazil and Cuba. He's the spirit of chance, unpredictability, the crossroads. But philosophically, he's more than just a trickster. He's the dialectical principle made manifest.
The go-between, the catalyst.
All of that. The messenger between humans and the divine, or Isa, the one who opens the path, but also the one who can cause confusion and trouble if not respected. He embodies the uncertainty and dynamism essential to life.
Which is why he has to be acknowledged first in rituals.
Absolutely. Because he represents chance and can disrupt things, you have to propitiate Isu first, make an offering, acknowledge his power, before proceeding with any other ritual. It's a recognition that life isn't neat or predictable.
Finally, how did these African conceptual frameworks interact with and transform something like Christianity when it arrived, this idea of vernacularization?
This is fascinating. Translating the Bible into local African languages, vernacularization had unintended consequences. It wasn't just about spreading the gospel, it became a vehicle for cultural autonomy.
How so?
By putting sacred texts into indigenous languages, it gave African intellectuals and communities new tools to reinterpret Christianity through their own conceptual lenses. It fueled independent prophet movements that created unique syntheses of Christian beliefs and African heritage.
And one key synthesis was how Christian healers redefined the role of the traditional healer, the Ganganga.
Yes, this was crucial for gaining legitimacy. The traditional Gunga sometimes operated in secrecy, using complex medicines, and could be suspected of using powers for harm, for witchcraft. There was ambiguity.
So Christian prophets needed to distance themselves from that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Figures like Simon Kimbangu in the Congo consciously transformed the healer role. They emphasized radical purity wearing white, using only plain water for healing, crucially, not charging fees. And they stressed openness and publicity in their healing practices.
To contrast with the perceived murky secretiveness of the old ways.
Precisely. They
Yeah.
were making a clear statement.
Yeah.
Our power comes directly from Christ. It's morally pure. It's transparent. It's not ambiguous, self-serving magic. It was a powerful conceptual and practical shift, redefining healing within a new ethical framework that resonated with the community.
Wow. So tracing this thread from Yoruba numbers, which challenge our basic ideas of math, all the way to how funeral speeches manage conflict, or how healers establish trust. It all points away from simple universals.
It really does. Concepts we treat as fixed number, reason, truth, even charisma, they emerge as relational, deeply political, embedded in specific languages, specific community struggles, specific performances.
And the big lesson, maybe, is that some of the most vital philosophical work isn't happening just in universities.
Not at all. It's in the market, it's in the structure of a language, it's in a ritual, it's in a resistance movement on a roadside. To really understand, you have to go beyond translation and try to grasp the logic of the practice itself.
That debate around the sages, folk versus philosophic, highlights something important, too. Maybe the real test of knowledge isn't just its logical rigor on paper.
But its usefulness, its ability to actually provide restitution, healing, lasting peace within a community, does it work for the people involved?
Which leaves us with a really provocative question to chew on. If an ideal like restitutive justice, focusing on restoring harmony and peaceful coexistence after conflict, which is strong in many African traditions, might offer more lasting solutions than purely punitive, potentially Eurocentric legal models.
Now, what other fundamental concepts do we need to re-examine?
Yeah.
Economics, governance, science, the very nature of truth. If we can see one differently, maybe we need to look again at everything through this lens of collective relational logic.
A lot to think about. Thanks for that deep dive.
Absolutely. Fascinating material.